let's start the Q&A. You have to leave, President and Celso. And if no one, okay, many people here. So, all right. Um, Here, I need you to take the microphone. Please, Shofi, identify yourself and make a concise question, since there are other. Yeah, I know
always
that.
make a
Sorry.
concise answer. I'm Osmar Trophy, a retired Brazilian diplomat. How will all of this impact on Turkey's adherence to the European Union? Possible adherence to the European Union.
All right. Let's collect. Yeah, Patricia, who has just come back from Syria.
Yes. I have two quick questions. First, when Turkey downed the Russian jet, was that a miscalculation, or what was the calculus behind this decision? And second, do you think that Erdogan is going to increase or actually go through with a full-blown attack against the YPG in Syria?
Good. Third one, Roberto.
Yes, looking from the
Identify
outside.
yourself.
Roberto Teixeira da Costa, I'm one of the founders of Business Council for Latin America and the Brazilian Center for International Affairs. How this political, very complex political situation, which for us Brazilians looks that we are in a paradise. But anyway, how
we are not, Roberto.
Don't exaggerate. But please tell me, how this is going to affect the possibilities of Turkey's entering the European Union? Because what everything you say, it looks very almost impossible for Europe. And second, how this is affect the economic situation of Turkey? How the foreign capital is flowing or not for Turkey?
Okay, so then I think next round one more. Okay, one more. Samuel.
Hey, Samuel Feldberg from the University of São Paulo. I guess you didn't have the opportunity to relate to geopolitical aspects, but if you could briefly give your opinion on the flanks of Turkey. Iran is coming out of sanctions and becoming more and more powerful in the region. How does Turkey look at it? And on the Mediterranean basis, there is an energy source coming up with gas, bringing together Israel, Cyprus, Greece, and possibly Egypt. So how does Turkey look at this from a strategic point of view?
All right. Your turn.
Regarding EU, the two questions somewhat overlap. Of course, it is not going to be helpful at all what's taking place, because as we say in various meetings and conferences, as you know, independent observers, and agreed by international audience as well, or experts, that Turkey no longer meets the Copenhagen criteria. Until 2012, more or less, with the peace process going as a positive incentive, Turkey was always seen as sufficiently fulfilling Copenhagen criteria, and the progress reports by the EU was just staying at that level. But with these developments taking place now, the collapse of the rule of law and politicization of the judiciary, partisanship taking place there, and also the laws that mean a backward-going laws like the MIT law, etc. that I mentioned, make it clearly that that there are huge problems to be dealt with. But another level, it's becoming clear that, you know, with the European Union is now in shatters, with the lack of leadership, a growing radicalization, you know, Islamophobia, xenophobia, etc., spreading throughout, and there is no cohesion of not even the domestic issues, let alone the international issues. Refugee crisis pressurizing the Western European flank of the European Union. I think the realization now is that EU no longer, due to its own problems, no longer can offer any kind of perspective to Turkey other than sort of temporary measures such as, or confidence-building measures, let's say, like visa liberalization, because Turks still have to apply against all rules of the European Union for visa, Schengen visa. For that's all the EU can offer. But the problem is whether or not AKP now completely eclipsed by the president, who feel a clear enmity, deep frustration about Europe, mainly because the European leaders did not go along with this idea about establishing safe zones within Syria, no-fly zones over Syria, etc. There were clearly no disagreements there, and also, Western media's critical, European media's critical stand, personalized taken personally by Erdogan. And the third element, Erdogan now sees the moment of attacking European Union in terms of getting a lot of plus points for himself as the national hero, like Putin, altogether means that as long as this constellation stays in the ruling echelons of Turkey, at best, at one moment, privileged partnership may come into question. As far as we see it, there is no more any clear, set of clear conditions for continuing membership. There are actually some off-the-record indications from the diplomats that I speak in Ankara and Istanbul, saying that the refugee deal between Brussels and Ankara, it will be given a chance. And if it doesn't work, somehow, if Turkey does not deliver, the next November summit in EU will be key, because in that case, EU, also Cyprus will be coming into question, I must mention. If no delivery happens, the Turkey will be suspended from the membership talks. This has become much more serious now. On another level also, there are voices now coming from the states that NATO membership even may be brought to discussion.
What kind of delivery?
Well, for example, about Cyprus, it's pretty optimistic actually that the Cyprus issue, through Cyprus issue, Ankara shows goodwill by helping out unification of the island. And also, on the other level, the refugee crisis, making the deal work by stopping the Syrian refugee flow into European, or into Aegean, let's say, into Greece. Those are the issues that the deal, refugee deal envisages. But it's a very difficult moment. It's full of question marks. Nobody really knows. But the process between Turkey and EU is not healthy. It's going in clutches. About the Russian jet, you know something when you're asking this question, I must. Yeah. So am I. No, the Russian jet, downing of the Russian jet, as you remember, was rather enigmatic for us when we heard this. The reactions from the staunchly pro-government media lately gives some indications that the downing of the jet did not really happen from a decision-making process from top down. And there were some well-informed pro-government columnists indicating that this was part of a conspiracy, again involving those guys present in the hall, the parallel guys. one minister accusing the pilot of being anti-AKP, something. But what we could gather is that there is a rift between, this is an unresolved issue apparently between the AKP, Erdogan and Davutoğlu, and the top brass. One story I heard, and I could not get it confirmed, but I can mention it here, that there were 2 Russian jets circulating. One went away, but the other was persistent. And the ground folks did not know what to do. There were Turkish jets as well. So they had to go all the way to Ankara to ask the top generals because they did not know what to do. But prior to that, Prime Minister had given clear instructions on rules of engagement, and he spoke proudly about that. We now know, no Russians can come to our, and we have given our military orders of rules of engagement. So apparently, citing this paper, rules of engagement, the top generals decided, without asking the politicians, to down the jet. There is a lot of dust coming out of this discussion, but we don't know yet what really happened. But apparently, it was a sort of decision of the military. Another question was with YPG, the Syrian Kurdish in Syria. It is an issue of rift between America and with White House and Ankara. It continues to be so. But the latest indications after the visit and meeting between Obama and Erdogan are now very clear that the Americans are sidelining, finding sophisticated ways to continue to support YPG from West and from East. So the decisiveness of the American side is very solid. And what the question that remains is whether or not the Turkish government will do something hasty and drastic. But that seems to be out of the question, reading the signals coming from White House. So my take is that the YPG forces will continue to settle wherever they are and do advance more slowly. But one thing is also clear, after the talks between Obama and White House, that the remaining 90-kilometer long strip will have to be closed down because some of the suicide bombers lately in Brussels were proven to be passing by that border. But closing that border will bring another question. As soon as it is closed, we will see an eruption of terrorist acts in Turkey due to frustration. That's what the experts expect. Economic situation. Yes, you were asking about economic situation. Well, the economic situation it's not healthy at the moment because of slowing down of investments, etc. But mainly due to the collapse of tourism. Up to 60% of cancellations from Britain. Similarly so from Germany. Due to crisis with Russia, almost nullification of the Russian tourists to Mediterranean coast. And the bombings in Istanbul had an immense effect of scaring people out. And recently both France and Germany issued warnings for people not to go to Istanbul. We are talking about calculated loss of $11 billion for Istanbul up until the end of this year. So when I left Istanbul, it was restaurants were almost empty. Some hotels got closed for operations. It's a chain, so its aftershocks will be felt after the summer. And what I heard from Tourism Association was also up to 3,400 hotels are now on sale in Turkey. 400 of them are these famous resorts in the Antalya coast. So this will, if the situation continues, and it probably will, this will have a devastating effect on tourism, not only in Istanbul, but generally in the country. Somebody asked about the regional geopolitical aspects yet. But it's a long one, but to make it short, it's isolation, and Turkey has lost much of its leverage to be part of the game in general in regional policies. What began as a doctrine full of promises in terms of zero problems neighborhood policy, architected by Davutoğlu, supported by former President Gül, has now collapsed. And it began with the collapse of the Armenian-Turkish protocol process already, 2009. And that was Erdogan to blame, because he interfered in the last moment in a speech in Baku. Everything was ready just to be signed. And he reasserted the Nagorno-Karabakh issue out of context, wanted to make it into the context, and everything collapsed. And from then on, it was a chain reaction. And each and every conflict, now people start to write more clearly now that it's collapsed, how interventionism of Erdogan undermined the possible successes of this doctrine, which was benevolent, which was based on interdependence, and also the hubris created by Arab awakening in the top echelons of the AKP party, as we are possible leaders of this change, and we will represent the Sunni world, Morsi, Tunisia, etc., led to one erratic decision after the other, and this peaked in Syria. And these erratic decision-making has become systematic, and now you can see very clearly that in 7 countries throughout the region, Turkey lacks diplomatic contacts, relations, or minimized relations. Armenia, Cyprus is already there as a problematic area, Israel, Syria, Egypt, Jordanian king does not really have strong positive feelings about Erdogan. He made it very clear. So it's a country that's also become perceived as a part of the problem rather than part of the solution, and not playing the game really, full of promising something but doing something else. And it became a problem of profound mistrust with the US and with the European Union. Of course it is. But still, there are some contexts that keep it less risky, say NATO. And legalism, international legalism of the Turkish armed forces is another element. And some part of the Turkish foreign ministry still there with the memory of all days. So it is a limbo with a lot of risks ahead.
Well, last round of questions. One here, one there, and Lorival. All right, and then we finish.
Alberto Kremitzer, one of the founders of the Jewish Museum in São Paulo. My first question is Turkey still as secular as Mustafa Ataturk wanted it to be? And the second one is, was there any religious influence, any change in the religious profile of the political forces throughout the phenomenon you just described to us?
Good.
Add to that, so that
Okay,
we can
the-
open for another question, because there was another question here.
Is
It's
there?
the same subject.
I haven't seen any. Oh, yo, you did. All right.
Is it the
Is it
same?
the same question?
All right.
Good.
Because you talked about the Pandora box, which was opened by the fact that the Sunni, the Turkish Sunni, have become sort of upper class, privileged by the regime, whereas the Alevis, which are sort of a Shiite minority with some elements of pre-Islam religiosity, and the Kurds have become some sort of underdog class. My question is can that be felt in the relationship between people? I mean, is there some sort of antagonism of sectarian or ethnic antagonism which has grown up after this strategy by Erdogan? So maybe
Good.
that's
And
more or
then
less.
the Medina, and then the last one. Okay. Then you comment. You comment now, and then Medina. All right.
My name is Alex Strom, and it's about the same, more or less the same question. What is fairly the breakdown of the Turkish people in terms of religion? How, more or less, how many are secular, how many are religious? If there are important religious breakdowns, what are they? And how does this breakdown affect all this political scenario?
Good. Very good. Then Medina.
So my name is Medina. I am a regular physician, so I have a naive question. What drives the Turkish leader to destroy his own country?
Very good.
Is all? Yeah? Okay. Well, the first question, the answer to your question, Turkey has never been secular. This is just an illusion that people tied to founder Atatürk, etc. But system has never been secular as we know it. You know, we have had a state institution called Directorate of Religious Affairs, with the largest budget in the departments, employing imams. I mean, imams as servants. So this is not really a state that stays out of that domain. It's in the middle of it. What makes it worse and non-secular is that the entire composition of that structure, immense structure of what we call Diyanet, Director of Religious Affairs, is 100% Sunni. So it doesn't have any representation of Alevis, Assyrians, you name it. There are, I think, more than 12, 13 different creeds in Turkey. And also non-Muslims, such like Christians, Orthodox, Catholics, Jews, etc., etc. So Turkey, it's wrong to say that Turkey was secular, but what has become now, what's happening now is that Turkey has even become much less secular than before. Because the ruling party realized that this powerful structure already existing, institutionalized to the very cells of the system throughout the country, could be used as a new instrument for employing a tutelage. So it has become instrumentalized to 100%. Formerly, it was It was the top brass, the military, that was the main instrument of tutelage. It has now transferred into to Diyanet. Very useful institution in harmony with the rhetoric and also the worldview of the ruling party. It produces the Friday khutbahs, no, Friday, what do you call it? Edicts? No, not edicts, but Friday, huh? Yes, that is read by the imams in the mosques. So it is centralized system. It doesn't have anything to the secularism that we understand from the American or kind of West traditions. That's so. In that sense, we can just dismiss that idea, but it is just becoming worse. The other one was the breakdown of the people. There are not so many in-depth studies lately about this, but it's a largely conservative society, and the pious, I think, is up to 65%, more or less, give or take, and those who call themselves secular are about 20-25%. Very tiny segment of atheists, and in addition to that, some religious, some not, mainly secular. 14 million Kurds out of 78 million, which is about 18% of the society. Some of them secular, modernized through the battle of the PKK, because PKK was a modern movement in a way, liberalized the women, etc. Although it's a extremely violent Stalinist organization, it's attributed to the role of that. Then you have 8 million Alevis, which separate themselves from the Sunni segments. Then you have tiny bits of other. So this tells why since 1946 the center-left, secular left, Kemalist secular segments did not have a chance of lasting governments. The alternatives always have had to come from within the conservative political segments. And this will continue to be so unless the secular center-left movements find a way, a vision, create a vision to embrace the demands, expectations of the conservative segment. They have to make peace with this phenomenon in Turkish reality. And your question was?
About the relationship between people. This strategy by Erdogan has somehow
Oh, yeah.
created more
Cleavages. Well, it's visible. It was visible when it erupted in the Gezi protests, which was a social cultural resistance. It just made very visible to us what kind of divisions there were. And then as the monopolization of power continued to take place under Erdogan's banner, the divisions also became very clear between the Kurdish and the other segments, unified somehow, you know, seculars and nationalists, etc., against the Kurdish segments. If your question is whether or not it has increased or become more visible, it's hard to say. But what we see is a society showing more and more frustration, expressing more and more disgruntlement, and often these are expressions out of despair that there are no alternative movements that can respond to their expectations and demands. So many people say that Turkey is, unless an alternative movement comes with a reasonable amount, delivering hope, promising hope, these will sooner or later lead to clashes, more physical confrontations between these segments. We are not there yet, but we have all the signs and indications that it's getting there. Particularly about the acts of terror creeping into the Western Anatolian, urban areas, megapoles, cities. They have an effect of triggering these frustrations.
Attacks being by ISIS and by Kurds, or are
Both.
the security forces doing part of that as well as
The rage.
No, the terrorist
I mean,
attacks.
there's terrorist attacks. Is there,
Have they been
are there fingerprints of the security forces trying to create more tensions, more chaos, or is it clearly the ISIS and the Kurds?
Some smaller scale acts of violence, like killing the two policemen that I mentioned, had some murky fingerprints that involved some dark forces, but were never truly convincingly proven. But clearly the bombing in Ankara, and one of the suspects are caught today, is in Gaziantep province, had fingerprints all over of ISIS in the Ankara bombing. And then the violence with the Kurdish, involving the Kurdish segments, is very complicated, because PKK has become so vast that out of control of the, if you will, command of in Kandil Mountains, is that now there are formations such as TAK, which calls itself not really under the command chain of the PKK, but sees itself legitimized to conduct acts of terror, for example, in Ankara, against the police buses of the security staff. And there are also indications that what's called immortality teams of loosely formed pro-PKK youth groups placed in Istanbul and Izmir will now start attacking if the sides don't return to the peace table soon from the summer. They are threatening with this. So it's a loose-jointed movement. For example, the resistance also in these small Kurdish towns like Silvan, Sur, etc., are not the PKK. You know, those who resisted for 90 days, weeks after weeks, against the Turkish tanks and forces, are something called Dem Genç. It's a Dem youth or something like that, who, which are the spontaneous pro-PKK, like, new generation of Gaza Palestinians who wanted to prove themselves out of hatred for the Turkish system. So, this is, no matter what, the response to your question is that it is a complicated picture, but the fingerprints of both the Kurdish K and ISIS I is there. And this will have a triggering effect, if anything, because the powder keg is there, and the lack of alternatives is making this powder keg explodable at any moment.
Then the final question about Erdogan obsession with destroying Turkey. I mean,
Well, if you had asked him this question, he would say, I am the savior of this country. I'm sent from above, and I'm doing a great job. And, as he said in Brookings a week ago to a question, said, I never went down in terms of popular support below 41% in the past 13 years. My nation loves me. So based on this legitimacy of ballot boxes, he thinks that whatever he does is good for the country. I don't think he sees what other people see, and he sees also a legitimacy in micromanaging the country because he believes in what he's doing, and he's very certain that he's building a wonderful nation that everyone admires and envies. So I don't know if it satisfies to your question, but it's very difficult,
He's a firm believer in himself.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Yavuz, for this very well thought and very well informed presentation. I would ask you, please, to, if you can, to share your text with your colleague Otávio Dias, who is in charge of summarizing the talks here. I think it would be a great help for him to have the text. So please join me in applauding Yavuz.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm tempted to say good luck.
Thank you.
And you have friends here, and we would love to see you back here as soon as possible. Thank you.
I hope so.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.